It's time for 41 is the Mic, a weekly Chiefs podcast with Nick Jacobs of KSHB 41 and Matt Derrick of Chiefs Digest. 41 is the Mic starts now.
All right, I don't know if everyone out there is as exhausted as I am, but that was a thriller we watched today, Chiefs and Broncos. You're here, 41 is the Mic. I am Matt Derrick from Chiefs Digest. I'm alongside KSHB 41's football cultural enthusiast, Nick Jacobs. Nick?
Oh, boy, don't get me started about football culture, buddy.
I'm trying to get you started.
Go on that's my hot button, man. I'll go on a rant about that one if we haven't had down that road.
We haven't had a good Nick rant in a while, so I'm signed up for it. Yeah, let me I can grab my Cheez-Its and listen.
Get some more. Yeah, thanks for reminding me when I got my cabinet and I got the 4-cheese blend. I'll check that out in a minute. But yeah, no, football culture. Okay, since I asked Clark Hunt about it a couple weeks ago, I've heard that buzzword getting used around a lot in Kansas City on some of the other local media in town, but not using it properly. So, football culture. You got to look at it from the top, from what Clark Hunt did. Clark Hunt gets Andy Reid, meets him in the airport, and Clark previously talked about how he wanted to be like the Patriots, like the Steelers, always in it, chasing championships or having a chance to compete for championships. And then when I asked Clark about that, and he responds and says that, Andy even surpassed what they had talked about. But if you look at where Andy is from 2013, and this is where this is funny because they went 9-0 that year, from 2013 until where they're at now, where they're 9-0 again in 2024, the culture that they have built, it isn't just what they've done in the past couple years. It has been since 2013, where Andy Reid and every single player from 2013 has helped build this brick by brick, whether it's Chase Daniel, Alex Smith, Mike DeVito, Derrick Johnson, Donnie Avery, AJ Jenkins, Travis Kelce, Anthony Fasano, Sean McGrath. I could go on and on and on and on and on about every single player, but every single one of those guys had to buy into what Andy Reid and that coaching staff at that time was selling, what it was going to take for them to win and be successful. So all those Chiefs who were on that team did that during that 9-0 run. Then when they go 9-0, they start to fall off. They start to dip. They have some losses here and there. A lot of that was because of personnel perspective, to where they didn't have the safeties to be able to keep the range with some of the explosive plays. And then when they faced the Colts, it all came to a head. And then the Colts came away with that decisive victory. But there was little nuances along the way about how you work and how you go about things that cost them in that game. One of them was the red line. When Dwayne Bowe didn't climb back on top of that route on that red line, and he drifted. And then you got Xavier Worthy this year, who I kind of feel like deja vu sometimes, who has a little bit of that drift at times on some of his routes. But he's learning. But he's a rookie. Dwayne Bowe was a seasoned veteran at that point. But football culture is the guys before you building a certain mentality, building a certain way that they approach things. Then they cranked it up to 11, if you want to use Spinal Tap for this, to where they took it to a whole new level in a championship, to where that 2018 run, when they went toe-to-toe with Brady, won that playoff game, and even whenever Alex Smith and them won that first playoff game against Houston down there. Then they lost to the Patriots the following week, but they had a really tough physical game that they really held in on there. But talk about 2018, they do that. Then 2019, they win the AFC Championship, have that big moment against the Titans. Then go on to win the Super Bowl. But you saw it steadily build over this past decade. So when I talk about football culture, it's about 53 guys. It's about a coaching staff, all collectively buying in to what the motto is that Andy Reid sets, the tempo that he sets, what Brett Veach tries to set in the players that he goes out and gets to be able, that will be guys who will buy in. May not be the most athletic, may not be, the player that every single team covets, but they're the right player that has the right mental mindset to come away with that. Take a look at today with Leo Chenal. Leo Chenal is a perfect example of it. They draft him. Dude's one of the strongest people on the planet. Athletically, may not, from a coverage perspective, you're not sure, but you've watched him steadily grow in this system, grow in this mentality that they have. And then in one of the most crucial moments, who the Kansas City Chiefs are all comes together. The football culture that they have is every play matters. You may not win every play, but every play matters. There are teams that would have taken off that play and been like, well, we lost, tough break this week. But that Chiefs team, they were gassed coming into the game. They were beat up. They were worn down. And that's not a knock on them. That is playing an overtime game of Monday Night Football and just physically where they were at. So they were not going to have their A game today. There was times where they probably had their C game, maybe even a D game. But they still played every single play, and it mattered to them. Then you get to one of the most crucial moments when you got to dig deep, when your body's exhausted, when your body's worn out, and you've got to figure out a way to make a field goal block or to do something to stop that. Because there's a lot of things I'll talk about in a minute, and we'll go back to it in a minute with sequencing, but I want to give you the floor. But in that moment, all of them collectively have bought in from everything that was built to 2013 to now, and they put it out there in that moment, and they knocked those two poor offensive linemen over. And you saw literally there was almost 5 guys that could have blocked that kick if it hits at various points and various angles and if the hold goes here and the ball goes here, it didn't have a chance. But Leo and Karlaftis get that in that key spot in that key moment and make that happen. So long-winded answer here. Football culture, the Chiefs football culture that they built during this whole run, even before Mahomes and before half these guys were here, helped pave the way to what happened today.
I mean, and you saying that gives me a couple of leap off points because I think
go for it, Matt.
Well, I think it absolutely
the whole dance floor for 6 minutes. You go for it.
I think it absolutely supports what you're saying and your theory and that field goal block. You saw so many elements of that. And one of them is that, you look at that and certainly that was a different scenario because in that situation, you don't need to worry about a fake. There's no tricks. It's going to be a kick. Oh. So, one, you saw 11 guys in the line of scrimmage going after that kick. There was no, anything else. That was the only goal on that. Right. And 2, I am absolutely certain that the Broncos' number one concern was do not let Justin Reid block that kick again because he got one against him last year. And how did he get that block last year? He got it because he was in the film room, a starter, not a backup who only gets to play special teams. But Justin Reid, one of your most valuable defensive pieces, is in the film room and working with the special teams and saying, hey, wait a minute, I see something on here that I can time this. I know how to go after this kick, and decided he was going to put it in his back pocket until he needed it. Pulled it out at the right time. I think he almost had a couple of blocks in that game, but obviously got the one that he wanted. And I know that was in the Broncos' minds. That was don't let Justin Reid block this kick again. And when they did that, it weakened their interior. So not only I think physically, but probably mentally, it weakened the interior. It helped set it up because, and the Chiefs got a great photo of that. I mean. And that's the thing that really stands out to me about that even more is that had Leo not blocked it, there were 2 other guys that probably are getting their hands on that ball because Karlaftis was, I think, right behind him.
And Wharton was in the middle. Wharton
was right there,
and
too.
Anna's off to the side where he may have a shot.
I think Pennell had a hand somewhere in there, too. I mean, it was like there were 3 or 4 guys that, and let's face it, I mean, Leo did not just fingertip it. I mean, it hit his forearm. I mean, so they were blocking that kick. And then you see Josh Williams, who gets, a hard time because, he hasn't achieved what everybody has wanted him to do at the corner, and he's been up and down the depth chart there. And what does he do? He realizes, and he knows his job. He knows that's a live ball. and he chases it down to make sure that the Broncos don't pick it up and go with it. Once again, a lot of teams, a lot of guys say, block kick, we won, and start running off the field. Wouldn't think to do that. But you saw that stood out to me, that Williams, immediately saw that loose ball, and he wasn't trying to scoop and score. He wasn't trying to be a hero, anything of that nature. He just went to go try and land on that football and make sure the Broncos couldn't do it. And what is that? That's culture. I mean, that is guys buying in. It's team before me. And I mean, I'll say it. When I started covering this team in 2016, that was not always the culture, because it was an evolutionary process. I mean, and some of it is that, you have players that you inherit, you try to fit people in, and you can't change the world in a day. So, Andy Reid changed a lot, but, some of it was getting the right players. And I'll get my last little, rant about this. Now you've encouraged me to go off on a mini rant, Nick, is that I was looking earlier, going through some numbers for a story I'm working on. And, the Chiefs are the number one defense in the NFL as far as runs in between the tackles and expected yards allowed between the tackles. They also have the lowest missed tackle rate on runs between the tackles. And you know who's most responsible for that? It's Nick Bolton. And how often does Nick Bolton, get kind of raked over the coals because he's not the fastest guy on the field, and, he's not the, fastest coverage defender. And he probably gets blamed for things that sometimes aren't his fault, and he takes credit for it. I mean, even if it's not his fault, he's going to fall on the sword. He will protect his teammates. If people think something's his fault, he's not going to correct them. I mean, that's what leaders do. That's what players do. But Chiefs' run defense wouldn't be what it is without Nick Bolton, and doesn't get enough credit for it. But that's what team culture is about. It's about not caring who gets the credit for it.
Because you know what's coming at the end of the year if everything goes right. Yes. Championship.
Yes.
So,
and that fits in a little bit with, going to this game in particular, because we've been talking about it, Nick, over the last couple of weeks, that and the question started coming today. There was a little bit of in the post-game press conference, hey, are you guys thinking about going undefeated? Some of these questions starts popping up. And, and Justin Reid, I think, had probably the best answer to them all. It's like, no. I mean, no, it's not a thought process that pops up at all. And I know that in that locker room, that every player on that team, hey, would be going undefeated and going 20-0 be cool? Sure. But they're more concerned about winning a championship. And if it meant that they lost the next 7 games, but they knew they were going to win a championship, they'd be fine with that.
You're not wrong, Matt. I think what's kind of fitting when you kind of think about it is, so if you go back on a couple of those, Mahomes misses maybe 2 touchdowns, definitely the throw to Kelsey that's wide open touchdown. If that happens, then the Broncos aren't looking for a field goal to win the game. That field goal block may not happen. And then the Chiefs have to go for the field goal, to go ahead and everything. So they did that versus electing to go forward on 4th down. So that's another decision that has a chain reaction to it. And then they had to try to force the Broncos and stop them, even though they knew they were burning up clock and everything. They still were not going to let them get an easy yard. Still were not going to let them just go try to hurry up and score. They take the ball and then they go down there because the defense has pride. If all of those things don't occur, they don't get that chance to have that field goal block. So for them, that special teams play mattered. It was just as important as any other play in that game, and that's how that team treated that. So what happened in this game, the way it resonated, I don't know if people are truly going to appreciate. If there's a player on that roster who doesn't believe that every play matters, they found out today that it does. For any of those rookies out there that weren't sure about that, any of those veterans that this is their first time in the Kansas City Chiefs roster, or going on this ride and everything, versus playing on probably some teams that weren't at this level mentally, and how they challenge themselves physically and their toughness and everything. they got another reminder today of why the Kansas City Chiefs are who they are, why pretty much every other fan base hates them. And that right now, it does not matter the circumstance. It does not matter the situation. The Chiefs just want to give themselves a chance every single time. Just give themselves a chance to make a play. And somehow, some way, every single week, somebody new rises up and answers the bell.
This is going to sound like a very egotistical statement, and there's probably going to be, hey, there's going to be some fan bases, if they hear me say it, they're going to, chop it up and just say, oh, this is a elitist Kansas City Chiefer here. But I mean, a lot of this talk around the NFL right now is that the Chiefs are 9-0 because they're lucky, that they've just had some things really go their way. And you know what? They have had some things go their way. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that in this game, a lot of times, and I'm going to start sounding like Eric Bieniemy a little bit here, you make your own luck. I mean, hey, does blocking a kick require a little bit of luck? Absolutely. But Chiefs made it happen, and if they got lucky, it's because they worked their butt off to put themselves in a place to get that luck. It wasn't like that they were just, standing there hoping that if they jumped up in the air that they might catch the football. No, I mean, they were trying to put themselves in a position to make a play. And, you were saying it earlier. I mean, there's a lot of teams that would give up in some of these situations. This team doesn't give up. And, it's because they have leaders that don't give up. And that's what, it stands out to me about this. And, and we'll get it in here in a moment. And, there's good and bad to take out from this game. I mean, let's face it. I think, hey, Chiefs fans are celebrating this win. They should. It's exciting. Are there things to come out of this game that are, that you can improve on? Absolutely. Are there some things you can hang your hat on? Yeah, there's a couple of things. But, it's all part of a journey. And that's where I think that, Andy Reid really excels as a coach, and it's something that I don't think every coach understands. I think Bill Belichick understood it. I think there's other coaches who understood it. I don't think Andy Reid necessarily maybe truly got it 20 years ago, but I think he gets it now, which is that it's a journey. And this season may be more of a journey than any other because of the injuries that the Chiefs have faced and everything like this, that they've been forced into a position of triage where, they're not just going kind of week by week and everything. Now they're in a situation where they've got so many moving parts. You got DeAndre coming in and Kareem coming in and Hollywood sitting out and Juju's banged up and you don't know Jalen Watson where he's going to be. But the Chiefs are, and Pacheco obviously, but the Chiefs are trying to navigate two things. They're trying to navigate a season, but they're also trying to make sure that when they hit the playoffs, that they've got everybody that they want healthy, in a good space, and ready to be 100% and go for it. Because this postseason is more important than any one they've ever had, and they get that. But Andy Reid's also learned that it's not all about winning every single game; it's about winning the journey. And means you're sometimes you're going to lose, and maybe the Chiefs should have lost some of these games. Maybe they did get lucky. But they also work pretty hard to put themselves in a position to benefit from the luck. And a lot of teams don't do that.
You gotta buy a lottery ticket before you can have luck. That's all I'm saying.
And sometimes you have to work to earn that money to buy the lottery ticket.
Mm-hmm. So let Andy Reid be your football Sherpa as he guides you on this 2024 journey.
We talked about it, Nick. So let's get into it because there was good and bad today, and I think the one I'm going to give the defense a little bit of a pass today because you look at the overall numbers. Hey, they held the Broncos under 300 yards, only gave up 14 points, none in the second half. Special teams obviously helped them out there a little bit, but the defense did what it needed. If you're going to give up 14 points, you're going to win a lot of games in this league. So, and this was an improvement point-wise from the last couple of weeks. So, like I said, I'm going to give the defense, maybe not an A, but at least a passing grade because they did what they needed to do. Offensively, this was a struggle today, Nick. I mean, there was some good, but there was some really bad. And, obviously when Wanye went down, the protection on that offensive line changed dramatically.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start twofold. One, I said a little bit ago, but I'm going to say it again and reiterate it. This team physically was giving what it had available from how short of a week it had. Because you got to remember, the Broncos were done by Sunday at 3. The Chiefs weren't done technically till nearly midnight on a Monday. That's a huge advantage to be able, that additional almost full day, and probably 9 to 10 hours. Like that's man, that's a lot of time to be able to rest and recover, to be a little bit fresher and have a quicker step and everything. So for the Chiefs, the biggest thing that they're going to have to tackle this week is doing everything that they can to rest and recover for playing Buffalo, because that, they're still, I hate to say, they're still a little bit behind because of what them winning 2 close football games in less than a week's time. So that's the reality on that. So though not everybody was going to be as quick today as they would be with a full week's rest. Not everybody was going to be able to get that reach block on the O-line. They weren't going to be able to just act as quickly, because there were a lot of guys physically beat up, and you could tell. And it wasn't because they didn't have passion. It wasn't because of the lack of trying. It's just they had what they had available, man. I hope people think of it like, if you get the flu or you get something and then you're trying to come back from it and you give everything you have physically, that's you've exhausted yourself. There's only so much you have in the tank sometimes. It's not always running at 100%. There's sometimes it may be running at 60 or 70, and I just felt like that's where the Chiefs' performance was today, and it wasn't because of a lack of execution. It was just a lack of, them having fresh muscles. So, that's just the reality of it. But to get to the offensive line, Wanye obviously did better than Kingsley. No mistaking that. There's no hiding that. Where I really got frustrated personally is Kingsley hasn't been out there for quite some time, in over a month. And when they put him out there was times where they left him on an island on his own, and it was not pretty. He wasn't sure if he should short set, if he should take a wider stance on some things. He got attacked on his inside shoulder by Benita a handful of times, and there was just ways that the Broncos were attacking the Chiefs' offensive tackles, whether it was Wanye Kingsley or Jawan Taylor specifically. There was a way they were approaching it, and they were trying to get Zach Allen around in part of it, and they were using Zach Allen to manipulate which guard they were going to occupy to be able to attack what they wanted on the tackles. But that's what they were going after all day. The Broncos knew what they wanted to do. They knew when they wanted to contain to one side and when they wanted to bring it from another. They know when they wanted to manipulate a blitz to force the backer to take them and then isolate what they wanted to against those tackles. But the Broncos were relentless in that all day because they wanted to make Patrick uncomfortable. And that's what Patrick Surtain said in their press conference this week, is they believe disrupting Mahomes was going to be the key to giving them a chance to win that game. And they were 100% right. So finally, the Chiefs, and the crazy thing is, even when P. Ryan chipped on one play for Kingsley and helped him out, Benita still got there, and then Mahomes had to scramble out to his right and throw it to P. Ryan and convert the third. Like, even when they did help, there were still problems, and there was still pressure that got back there. Vance Joseph knows how to attack the Chiefs. Now, the bigger question I have in the grand scheme of it is, I don't feel like they really did anything different than what they did the Chiefs last year, pass rushing wise. So how come they weren't more prepared for it? That's the bigger question that I think they've got to have a conversation about, not just this week, because teams are going to see that on tape and other teams are going to try that. Buffalo's going to try some of those things next week because they want to disrupt Mahomes too, and they want to win that football game. And then you're going to see teams down the road trying. You're going to see the Chargers try some of these things. You're going to see the Raiders try some of these things. Max Crosby, they're going to try to figure out ways to move Crosby around to get him one-on-one and try to take some Chiefs to church. So that's why that's the bigger conversation they have to have in their coaches meeting this week about how do they approach this differently? What do they need to do so that this doesn't happen again?
Yeah, I think the thing that frustrated me is that the Chiefs benched Kingsley with the intention of trying to rebuild him, physically and mentally, to give him a break so that, he could take some time and kind of, and digest everything, that they could work up on cleaning up some technique and some fundamentals. And there wasn't really anybody that I talked to after the game, Nick, who didn't come to the same conclusion that I did, which was that Kingsley looked more uncomfortable than he did in the first 2 games of the season.
Yep.
And that's troubling. I mean, the Chiefs still believe, I would still believe in Kingsley Suamataia too, but I think there's probably it's time to maybe take just a big step back and say, look, hey, I get there were some draft prognosticators that, said Kingsley Suamataia might be a late first round pick. If you're going in the late second round, you're not a projected first round pick. I mean, that was just pie in the sky, people telling you he's a late second round pick. And there's nothing wrong with that. Those players can be productive, but you got to have a reasonable expectation. And I feel like that, there was sky high expectations, and the Chiefs didn't do him any favors. They created the expectations as well by even talking about the fact that, this guy might be our starter on day one. That's a lot to live up to. There's a lot that needs to be refined and worked on with Kingsley, and that was shown today. I mean, there's still work to be done there. It's not a lost cause, but I think we learned that, Kingsley's a long way away from being the player that the Chiefs want and need him to be.
And the question they have to answer is why? Why did he look worse than when you benched him? Why?
Yes, that's the question I would be asking this week, trying to figure out. Why? But I thought you also made a great point when you talked about and this is probably going to be true for the defense as well, but because I was in the locker room, Nick, I saw this team after that Tampa Bay game, and that was an exhausted team. I mean, that looked almost as exhausted as I would say a team that, had just played in 85 degrees in September. I mean, that was a physical game on Monday night. And one way you can know how beat up that this team was this week was that Andy Reid did not put them through a padded practice. On Thursday, when they would usually do their hardest work, and the players in that locker room call Thursday 1,000 play Thursday, because they just go as fast as they possibly can, as hard as they possibly can. Andy's trying to get as much work in there, and they try to get as many plays as possible, all the looks that they can get. Players hate Thursdays. And this past week, because of that Monday night game, they did 3 10-10-10s, we call them and everything, because, the way that they're structured. And those are no helmets, no pads. I mean, they are light practices. And, and Andy's been doing that, that's what development he did a few years ago, Nick, as well, that he doesn't do full practices on Wednesdays once later into the season. And that's something he learned over the years, is that, if you're going to expect your team to play 20-21 games, you can't beat them up every single day in practice. You got to manage it. And so he did that. And so the fact that he did that last week was an acknowledgement from the head coach. Wait, this team is exhausted. I need to give them a break. We're going to find out how beat up they are this week on Thursday, because if Andy gives them another 10-10-10 on Thursday, we're going to know, okay, that this game took a lot out of them too, especially coming off Tampa Bay. They need more rest. And I think we saw the evidence in some of the stuff that we're talking about with Mahomes, because, he had a few throws that could have been fatigue. They could have been also because of the rush. The pass to Kelsey that we're going to be talking about, because that was the one that was just wide open in the end zone, and he missed it. And that's very uncharacteristic of Mahomes. But he also was throwing it off his back foot. And when he does that, he sails the football. Was he doing that because he was just so used to the pressure being in his face most of the day? I don't know. Was he doing it because he was tired and just kind of didn't follow through with his fundamentals? Was it all the above plus other things too? I don't know. But, I mean, that wasn't a typical Patrick Mahomes throw.
Yeah, and then obviously with the ankle as well. For me, when Patrick gets rushed because of the pressure, when the pressure kind of soups him up and everything, that's when, like you said, a lot of those things I feel like start to happen mechanically. And I think he's going a million miles a minute and trying to get the ball out quickly so that he can protect his offensive line, help them get their confidence back if they're having some issues, try to figure out a way to get this offense in rhythm at the same time. And so I think he puts a lot of pressure on himself in a high, fast-paced situation, and I think he kind of soups himself up to where, like, unfortunately, it doesn't help him at times. And that's where I've talked about many times on our podcast, to where you've got to figure out a way to get back to zero. And that's something that, like, Matt Nagy and them, that's where they've got to have that answer. More so in the weeks ahead, like for Buffalo this week, how do they get him back to zero? What do they do to get that offensive line back to zero sometimes? Whenever Kingsley was getting beat, there were still times when the poor guy's being left out there, and I'm like, no, get him. Have a back weight. And the back is reading off that. And just do that so that guy gets back to zero. Let him do his set, but have a back help one way or the other. If he hits his inside shoulder or outside, I don't care, but help him right now. Help him get back to zero. Mahomes knows that running back's over there, so maybe that gives Mahomes another second or two, and then he pushes the ball down to Worthy, or he gets Hopkins here. But I'm really interested to see the coaching film to see what the Broncos are doing from a zone perspective, or how much man they did, to be able to see what they were able to kind of really stifle that Chiefs team. Because there was times, man, where the way they were hitting their pressure, the way they were bringing the blitzes, the way they were showing 6, dropping 2, or showing 7 and dropping 2, some of the stuff that they were doing, that to me was that they, on down and distances, knew the Chiefs were going to do these drops, and they knew they could get home. They knew they could get home because of where the tackles are going to be, because of this formation. They were convinced that they were going to do this drop, and the route combinations were going to take this long. And so they were going to be able to get there, and they were going to be able to physically, if they're in man, press them long enough to let the blitz get there and to disrupt Mahomes. So purely everything combined, if you watch coaches' film at all, watch it what the Broncos defense was doing to disrupt, because that's what Sean McDermott's doing this week. That's what that Bills defense is probably already doing this week after they finish up watching their game against the Colts, is they're figuring out how do they build on what the Broncos did to disrupt.
There's one thing about the offense today that I love, Nick, and I'm hoping it's a sign of things to come. I'm curious what you think.
If it's what I'm thinking, yeah, go for it.
Leading pass catcher today was Kareem Hunt, 7 catches, 65 yards.
Right.
And I mean, that to me, getting Kareem back to where he once was. And this is more evidence, once again, Nick, that when I talk about the 8 NFL teams that don't know what they're doing, and I firmly have Cleveland in that category, the fact that Cleveland did not throw the ball all the time to Kareem Hunt just tells you that they don't know what they're doing. I mean, Kareem in 2018, Nick, was averaging almost, I think, was 15 yards a catch out of the Chiefs backfield. And as much as he's getting beat up in the run game right now, I mean, he is such a good pass catcher. He's got soft hands. He can make plays, and you get the ball to him in space, he can still do things. He did that today. Some of it was desperation. Some of it was planned. And I think they were probably, I'm assuming, Nick, holding back a little bit of maybe the screen stuff just to get his timing back in and get him more familiar. I mean, Andy Reid screens are intense. I mean, they're very, very detailed. You got to be in the right place at the right time. And we saw one play today where if you're not in the right place at the right time, it can be disastrous. Almost a turnover on that play. But I mean, one way that if you can absolutely help out with the pass rush is, hey, dump it off to Kareem, and you get those defenders having to then stick around, especially on the edges. If you can get them having to be concerned about Kareem out of the backfield, it's going to slow down that pass rush.
Yeah, there was a couple of beauties that he had in the open field once he got the ball in his hands and ran over some people, and Kareem was having fun catching the ball in the flats and having some room to work with. That I saw a little pep in his step there whenever he was able to kind of work in space, which he doesn't necessarily get to do when he's running between the tackles right now. So I mean, yeah, Kareem had fun catching the pass, and man, that screen pass, they had a screen pass set up for him perfectly. I mean, it was set up perfectly. And then this corner got skinny against Creed. Creed couldn't get there in time to lay him out. And then that allowed another guy to be able to kind of slow it down. And like you could tell, you see Andy on the TV broadcast, and he's talking to some of the blockers and everything. And I'm like, I know what he's saying, man. Like if those two do what they need to, that's a walk-in touchdown. Instead, they had to kick a field goal with Harrison Butker. So there was some missed opportunities there and everything. But hey, it happens. It's just they've got to. I'm making sure that I'm weighing, knowing how physically exhausted they were. And if you saw Mahomes at the podium afterwards, that's a guy that looked like he'd been up all night with a newborn baby. I'm being serious.
No, I know.
He looked like a guy that had been up like he had a tough day at the office. He's had a tough week at the office, but today was probably the toughest he's had all year in terms of that. And like that's something that Andy Heck and that offensive line really got to take to heart this week, is that they really need to make sure 15 has what he needs to succeed so this offense can succeed. And that's where Matt Nagy and them got to figure out ways. Are there plays they can do to get them back to zero? Because there was times, man, where Mahomes is back there, and if the Chiefs have 3-step drop routes, like so Mahomes can get that ball out quick. Boom, 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 boom. They finally had him in the second half, but there was times in the first half where he needed them, and they weren't there because they were their 5- and 7-step drop developing routes. And that was part of the thing that they had to adjust in the second half to give themselves a shot. So they gotta. I just feel like they gotta have a better variety this upcoming week, or when they face a potential rush like that again, to really be able to again help Mahomes get into a rhythm, help that receiving thing get into a rhythm, help that O-line get into a rhythm, because they're all collectively going to need it together.
You know, and I mentioned at the top when we started talking about just the overall game, the defense, I mean, once again, only gives up 14 points, only gives up 260 yards. Those are positives. There were some weak points. I mean, they were 7 of 13 on third down. That's going to drive Steve Spagnuolo crazy. And there's a little bit of a concern about just being in the same game. You know, these two teams aren't even. This game should have been more of a margin. I still think that's mostly on the offense and some of their execution, but the defense had some things to work on. The one thing that I know that was a topic in the locker room, especially for the defense in the front four, was not getting pressure and not getting any sacks with the defensive line. The 2 sacks came on blitzes, one for Nick Bolton, one for Najee Johnson. But curious what you think, Nick, because I saw a Broncos game plan that seemed to be focused on get rid of the football quickly so you can neutralize Chris Jones.
Yeah, they didn't want Chris Jones to have a chance in this game. So you're 100% right. The thing for Bo is they're like, hey, because Bo isn't good if he has to change his footwork. If he can set his feet and throw, he's not half bad. But and then if he gets to take off and just purely run, not throw the ball, that gets him into a rhythm as well. So they were pretty locked in on, hey, catch the ball, 1-2 throw. Catch the ball, 1-2 throw. And just wear down that Chiefs rush over and over again, negate Chris Jones like you're talking about, and then take advantage of some spots where they aren't expecting from tendencies, like that 3rd and 1 where they had the Cortland Sutton touchdown. They knew what the Chiefs were going to sell out on that run on 3rd and short, and then they have the vertical over top with against Trent McDuffie, and then they deliberately had a tight end where Justin Reed was going to come down and cut on that route coming across there, and then they were going to have the defender running with it, but it was 2 routes, play action pass on 3rd and 1 that scored that touchdown. So Vance Joseph and Sean Payton had done their homework. They know this Chiefs. They've got a really good beat on this Chiefs team, more so than people realize. And the Broncos brought everything that they had today, effort-wise, play call-wise, skill set-wise, of what they had available. Everybody raised their game after their performance in Baltimore. So I don't want to diminish what the Broncos did today, because they came in, they played a motivated football game, but that's to be expected. And that's where a lot of fan bases who mock the Chiefs and say that they're lucky and say this and that, that's where they don't get it. And and Chiefs fans didn't get it. Media members didn't get it. When we were watching from afar with the Patriots, we didn't understand what it meant that every single week they were taking everybody's best shot, whether they were 1-14 or, or whatever. So like that's just where other fan bases aren't going to understand. That's where Chiefs are getting their opportunity from what Patriots fans went through and what they experienced about taking a team's best shot every single week. That's got to be physically exhausting. That's got to be mentally exhausting, and it just takes a different level of locked-in ability, but also the acknowledgement of how to properly try to help your body recover to get back to that point.
One quick thing that really stood out to me was that, the Chiefs made an adjustment. They went to a lot of dime coverage, and that meant getting Jaden Hicks out there more. But Najee Johnson had a great game. He had 10 tackles. Shamari Connor, I thought, played really well. With the Broncos wanting to get the ball out quickly to their receivers, isolated in space, it was absolutely up to these defensive backs to make tackles, and they did it. Yep. They gave up a couple of yards here and there, but the fact that outside those 2 drives, Broncos couldn't get anything to sustain, and a big part of it was that their secondary guys were tackling on the outside.
Yep. So it look, there's stuff for the Chiefs to work on. There's stuff for the Chiefs to improve, but at the end of the day, their football culture got them through it.
Well, this is going to be a big week, Nick, because it's basically a national television game. CBS has cleared the schedule, so
not just that, they're sending their pregame show crew to the stadium.
Yeah, this is basically a prime time game next week with Buffalo. So there's going to be a lot going on at One Arrowhead Drive. We are going to be on the Chiefs Digest Q&A on Tuesday night, and we'll entertain your questions. A lot of coverage both at Chiefs Digest and KSHB 41 throughout the week. And then Sunday, 325, excuse me. Chiefs and Bills be a big one, and we'll be on your feed after the game with the next episode of 41 is the Mic. Nick, I'll leave it up to you.
Until next time, I bid you adieu. It's Bills week.
You've been listening to 41 is the Mic, presented by KSHB 41, your home of the Chiefs and Chiefs Digest.